into, and I wasn't looking for it, but it just it became obvious as I was doing more and more interviewing of laid-off people that they were suffering emotionally and psychologically from the damage that a layoff did to their self-esteem and their sense of themselves. And depending on the person and how stable they were before, the effect was to the point. For some people, they just couldn't bring themselves to go after another job. They were depressed, various things. And I checked this with, I would get into interviews with people that would last an hour and a half. They were using me as a sounding board, and I couldn't cut them off. They were so involved in this terrible experience and what it's done to them. They went over and over again what was the cause. And I went to psychiatrists, and they said there's definitely, work is very important in America, as it is in many countries, and the damage to self-esteem when one loses a job that is a source of self-esteem is significant.
So there is this phenomenon that can be observed throughout the world that of layoffs heavily affecting an employee's morale and his health. But Mr. Uchitel just told us he hasn't come across any suicides, and you said that the rate
I wouldn't say any,
there's a record number of
very few.
That jumps out at you.
There's a record increase in suicides in the workplace in the United States, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It went from 196 last year, 2007, to 251 this year. The problem, one of the problems with suicides, one of the problems is it's so rare.
Yes, absolutely.
Suicide itself is actually a very rare event.
And quite extreme, which is why people here are so worried.
It's, I think the journalist will agree with me, Louis will agree with me, that it's in addition to many other things and a reaction to clinical depression, it's a cry for help. And in the case of France Telecom, I think it's a cry from the employees for help for their colleagues who are not pushed to that extreme yet. 23 suicides in 18 months in a good-sized firm, but which is a very small percentage of the French workforce, is an extraordinary
number. In the
number.
United States, I would say that the damage to self-esteem and to mental health is considerable.
Here too.
Whether in some cases it goes as far as suicide, I suppose. To me, it's sufficient that there is any damage at all to mental health. That's the issue.
Mr. Stewart,
I agree, by the way, with our friend in New York.
Mr. Stewart, you're saying this rate of suicide is statistically very important at France Telecom. That's what's surprising. Is there a French specificity there, or is there a France Telecom specificity? Is it the fact that some of these employees were civil servants and they find themselves employees of a private company? Could that be an explanation?
I think as far as we can tell, and I'm no medical doctor, a couple of years ago there was a small rash of suicides at Renault. Now, 20 years ago, there was a rash of teenage suicides in the United States. As far as I know from my reading in human resource management, suicide is contagious.
So you think there might be a sort of domino effect?
There's certainly people following other people's leads, and there's other people most certainly have very severe cases of depression. But for the management to overlook until it comes to the level of 23, I believe this is the second time the President of France has called in the President of France Telecom, to overlook such a phenomena is not good management. As you heard on the report, many employees here in France, as in the United States, are subject to threats. In the case of France Telecom, they've specifically been downgraded in their job positions. They've been transferred to long distances, probably not for a business reason, but rather to induce them to quit, which, as our book out of New York says, is an extreme hit to people's individual self-esteem, and they need someone to talk to, which they usually cannot find in an enterprise.
Now, Mr. Uchitel, very briefly, can you tell us, in this pursuit of increased profits for companies, are men and women, the individuals who make up companies, are they the ones who are bound to suffer, or is there a way to change this, to make working conditions better?
Well, there are ways to change things. There's no reason why layoffs should be the first, way to deal with with a cost problem. There are other ways to cut costs before you resort to layoffs. I would also add that the United States labor security, which was considerable in the 60s and early 70s, was gradually dismantled until when the layoffs really hit in the 80s and 90s. We had pretty much acquiesced to giving up job security, acquiesced much more so than you have in Europe. where
I disagree with you. You have much more job security in the United States than in France, at least, and you just don't know it.
All right,
Well,
I'm
we
afraid,
sure don't,
I'm
but
afraid
that's right.
that's all we have time for, gentlemen. I'm afraid that's all we have time for now, but thank you very much, Bill Stewart and Louis Uchitel from New York, for joining us for this discussion. And with that, we wrap up this half hour of news, but the next bulletin is coming up very shortly on France 24. Stay tuned.